And that is what Andy Yang, CEO of PlayHaven, is here to tell us about today. Andy?
Thank you. What I'd like to talk about today is all the stuff that you need to build to run a successful freemium game. I'm the CEO of PlayHaven, which is also in this space. But I'm going to take off my PlayHaven hat for this conversation, not talk about what we do at all, and really just focus on what you need to build and other service providers in the space that actually fill a lot of these different needs. I'm actually going to skip this About PlayHaven slide really quick. So a lot of what I hear about today from people in the space, particularly mobile and freemium, is that why is it so complicated to make a game now? And I always say it's not. Making games has always been complicated, but for different reasons. There's a different set of problems that you need to attack. Because even 10 years ago, to build a game, many developers had to build their own game engine. Right? So we take for granted for the fact that there are Unities out there, Unreals, that can help you take that big leap away from investing in your own engine and actually creating content. But it used to be really hard to build a game. You had to invest in technology, you had to upkeep it, maintain it, and make sure it's competitive in the market. And then you had a large publisher who controlled all the distribution and monetization. Right? So they held the keys to our success and controlled your destiny. And oftentimes you get a really small slice and share of the success. But that's largely changed in the last 10 years. So one big step is that game engines have largely simplified the content creation aspect. And with the advent of app stores on mobile, it's leveled the playing field in terms of distribution and monetization now, which is fantastic. You no longer have to rely on a publisher to get your game out there in front of a consumer and figure out how to monetize it. But it introduces a new set of challenges, which is complicated. You have to build a new set of technologies. So rather than focusing on building a game engine, you have to build an underlying online platform to help you drive those two goals. But I really think it's never been better to be in the gaming industry. It's really only a form of entertainment where anybody can build a massive business without the aid of the man in the middle. So if you look at music today, even if you're an indie band that builds a following, to really gain commercial success, you still have to work with a large publisher, right, to really push your music. Same thing with TV shows and movie. It's largely the same problem. Whereas in games, any indie developer can publish and be wildly successful almost overnight, which is fantastic. However, because all the control now is in the developer's hands in terms of distribution and monetization, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that, right? You can no longer rely on a third party to help you do all that. It's all in your hands, and it's really sophisticated and complex. That's why you need to build the right technology to capture your opportunities. And the good news is there's a rapidly growing ecosystem of tools providers and service providers that help you along the way. So as you're chasing the gold rush, there's a bunch of people selling helmets, pickaxes, and jeans in order for you to go after that. So there's really key areas to focus on in terms of freemium business. You need to acquire people, you need to engage them, and then you need to monetize them when they come in. And it's really no different from any other business, including just opening up a restaurant. Right? You need to bring customers in, they need to have a really good experience, and you need to monetize that experience in some way. I would say overall in the mobile space, there's been too much focus on acquiring new users and not enough on engaging and monetizing them. In fact, I think you should be thinking about it this way. First step, of course, is build a compelling game experience, and how do you keep them engaged and hooked? That gives you the ability to monetize better, which thus gives you more buying power on the acquisition side. So a lot of these successful players in the space monetize so well, so they can actually go and spend a lot of money acquiring new users, right? So really, you should be thinking about from the opposite direction, which is building compelling content and monetizing extremely well before you even think about acquiring users, because it's brutal out there. And there's kind of this underlying process you need to go through as you build your game. And again, this applies to any business out there. The first step is to learn what's going on, right, with your customer, with your business, really have the insight as to what's happening. And the second is based off those learnings, making decisions as what to do next. And the third is take action and gather the data again, and it's an infinite loop and it never stops. That's really one of the biggest differences in freemium businesses is all the hard work starts after the game launches, whereas in traditional box product games, all the hard work happens beforehand. You ship it, you go on vacation. In a freemium game, it doesn't work that way. You launch it, and that's just the first step, and you keep going through the cycle of learning, deciding, and acting. So what does that mean specifically? Here's a simple view of the full stack of technology you need to do this. So at the very bottom is just analytics. So collecting the data in some way, shape, or form. The second layer on top of that is now developing insights on top of the analytics, because data can be very overwhelming, and that's something I hear from a lot of game developers, whether they're large players in the space or small players in the space, is that there's just so much data to look at in a given time. What should I be looking at? So that's something that is really important, to simplify it at the top level, and then you can dig in deeper and deeper if you want to. And then to help you make decisions, A/B testing on top of that. So rather than just trying to make a guess every single time on what's a good price point, what should the color of my of these hats be, always be testing. And then on top of that is a whole tools layer to help you accomplish all your acquisition, engagement, and monetization. And I'll get to that a little later. And then, of course, being able to build that communication channel with your user, whether they're inside the game or outside the game. So reach out to them no matter where they may be. And then an orthogonal piece of this is segmentation. So being able to target users based on who they are and their behavior, rather than broadly to everybody. Because I always use a casino analogy for freemium games. You have people who spend a lot of money at a casino, the whales, and they get everything for free, right? They get treated like kings when they're in the casino. And then you have other people on the opposite end of the spectrum who are just walking through, maybe going to the bar, hanging out. So Las Vegas has that down to a science in terms of how they manage each customer segment. And it's the same thing in a freemium game. 1% of your users can be 90% of your revenue. So it's really important to keep that in mind as you manage your users. So starting the analytics layer is really end-to-end. You need to think about analytics from the time you're designing something to building it, to testing it, to releasing it, and seeing what your users actually do with it. So that's the foundation for everything that you do is the underlying data. And if you don't have good data, then you're not going to have good analysis on top of that. So it's going to be a garbage in, garbage out analysis. So you make sure that infrastructure is really solid. And ultimately, analytics are there to also monitor your day-to-day aspects of your business, right? Where are your opportunities and where are your risks and what's going on? Some great providers in the space that offer analytics are Contagion, Flurry, and Mixpanel. There's a ton of other ones, right? But these are kind of three of the bigger players in the space that offer analytics. And when you're looking at analytics, again, across the acquire, engage, and monetization pillars, there's just a ton of data to look at, right? But at the very high level, from an acquisition standpoint, you're looking at your lifetime value of your users by source. So you might be acquiring users from a bunch of different channels, whether it's Tapjoy, Chartboost, Flurry, wherever. They're all going to be worth different. They're all going to have a different backend in terms of how much they actually monetize. So it's really important to separate out by source. And then getting one level deeper, it's by source, by geography, where they are in the world, and by device as well. Because iPad users monetize better than iPhone users, and iPhone users monetize better than iPod users. So it's really important to be able to look at these different users by all these different dimensions. And of course, volume and margin are important. From engagement standpoint, really just how many users are active within your game. And so there's DAU, which is your daily active user, WOW, which is your weekly active user, and MAU. And those are really important metrics. But underneath that is the engagement retention level as well. How often are they playing your game? When are they churning? So those are really two important sub-metrics that you need to look at when looking at your user base. And time spent as well. This is often overlooked. If somebody comes into your game 10 times a day but only plays for 10 seconds versus somebody who comes in once a day but plays for 3 hours, which one would you rather have, right? So time spent is really important. Then when you're looking at monetization, you have to look at two different pieces of your business. One is in-app purchases. So with a freemium business model, it's all driven through virtual currency in-app purchases. And the second is ad revenue you generate as well. And to really be able to do apples-to-apples comparison, you need to look at it from an average revenue per user standpoint. A lot of people who first get introduced to advertising, they really focus on eCPM as kind of the key vanity metric, but really it's irrelevant. Because if you run 10 ads at, say, 50% eCPM versus one ad at 100% eCPM, which is more advantageous to you? It's really going to be the total revenue divided by the number of users, right? So that's also really important to understand, because some people get really stuck on eCPM. Now, A/B testing. So when you're going to make decisions, again, be creative. Think of all the different things you can do within your game that you want to test, but really the data is king in the sense that your users will tell you actually what's right. So sometimes you might think something looks great, this should sell really well, or this game's art style is fantastic, but if users don't gravitate towards it, it means nothing, right? So really testing as many different things as you can and letting the user tell you what's right and what's wrong is important to understand. And the other thing too is looking both short and long-term performance. So a lot of people do A/B tests. What they'll do is they'll look at it only from like a one-day perspective, jump to conclusions and get greedy and latch onto one thing, but ultimately it might have long-term performance decline. The best example is if you try to monetize too early, too fast. You might say in an A/B test that you generate more revenue, but long-term they're going to churn away and leave, right? So just keying in on one thing, such as monetization, but not looking at it from an engagement perspective can lead to a lot of trouble. So example providers in this space, there's a company called Swerve doing a lot of great things in A/B testing. PathMap and LeanPlum is a new company that's doing some pretty exciting stuff, particularly with tuning your in-game mechanics. You know, how fast on a platformer, how fast should a character jump, right? Like what's that speed? You can dial those things and A/B test that as well in terms of gameplay experience. Now, from an A/B testing standpoint, again, there's a lot of different things you can test in every key area. I'm not going to dive into these things, but ultimately it's across acquire, engage, and monetize. You should be constantly thinking about what to test, how to optimize in each of these three key areas. And then the third is to act. So it's, you know, once you gather all that data and you put some tests together, really you need to be able to touch the user, right? So whether it's inside the game, if it's an email, if it's a push notification, if it's real-time chat, really all the other stuff means nothing unless you can actually take action and build that relationship with your player. And it's really important to respect that relationship. It's a two-way relationship that you're building. So be respectful and, you know, take a quality over quantity approach in terms of how you message your user and how you think about managing them. That's extremely important. And just reward them, give them free stuff. Just like going back to the casino analogy, people like free stuff. It builds that loyalty, right? Like it keeps them coming back and it keeps them going. Some examples of people who give you the ability to act are Urban Airship, who has a great push product, AppBoy, and Playnomics as well, who also do some in-game messaging. So very important piece. Then in terms of other technology components, of course, if you're looking at advertising, which is a really salient topic today, a ton of different ad networks out there, right? And they keep popping up. So on the banner side, you have more traditional networks like Google and Millennial. On interstitials, you know, Flurry, Chartboost, Tapjoy, a ton of people do interstitial ads. And on the video front, Ad Colony, and I'm hearing a lot of good things about Vungle as well in terms of video ad providers. And then there's another set of ad technology companies. One is ad serving and mediation. So Burstly and MoPub both integrate a bunch of different networks and help you try to decide, you know, which network to run at any given time. So it's kind of a simple way to say, instead of building 10 different relationships with 10 different contracts, just work through one player that can help you manage it all. Another hot topic as of late, especially in 2013, is traffic attribution. So you have companies like HasOffers and AdX that allow you to spend money across a bunch of different networks and actually assign value to each of those users on a per network basis. Because even in 2012, for a long period of time, people weren't doing that, right? They were just like spending money kind of blindly and not really understanding which networks were providing the most value. So companies like HasOffers and AdX are making that very simple now for you to understand. An emerging trend is real-time bidding as well. I won't really get into that, but we're moving towards a world of programmatic buying, just like what's happened on the web. But I won't get into any detail. Other stuff, if you're looking for a backend solution, so you don't have to build out a whole server-side backend, Parse, which got acquired by Facebook, is great. Kinvi. On the social side, there's two really interesting companies that are doing what OpenFaint used to do, but make it white labeled for you. So you can build your own social network within your portfolio of games. One's called Rave, and another one's called OpenKit. And just some other miscellaneous stuff. Segment.io is really cool, kind of a data aggregator tool. And Appington does voice prompts within your game. So tutorials or voice ads, also quite interesting. So as you're thinking about building this stack, there's always a build versus buy analysis, right? So which pieces do you want to build yourself, and which ones do you want to just partner on and purchase? And really, there's a couple key questions you need to ask yourself. And we've seen this over and over again at PlayHaven, is our customers will have this internal platform team building a lot of this stuff, and those resources keep getting drained away over time so that they can focus on building more games, right? It almost happens in every case, it always happens, especially if there's a bad quarter or a few months of revenue coming down. So it's a long-term investment. Are you really willing to make that investment? The third is, if you are going to go the buy route, how many SDKs are you willing to deal with? They're a huge pain. Each SDK is on their own development cycle. Any one may introduce a new bug that can crash your game. It's complicated. But even more difficult is all the different data sets that you have coming in. So every service provider you use is going to have another set of data, either through a dashboard, an API, an Excel spreadsheet that you're going to have to munge together and figure out what the hell's going on, right? So it's really hard to do apples-to-apples comparisons at times. And really, the most important piece is thinking through all of the above very carefully and making a conscious decision up front. You know, which pieces do you feel like you want to invest in, and which piece you want to partner. But that's really important, instead of accidentally stumbling into it over time. So that's it in terms of my presentation. Any questions?
Excellent talk, Andy. Looking, if you could go back a couple slides, one more, yeah. So right now, effective cost per customer acquisition, that one variable can wreak the most havoc and a profit and loss sheet.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering how you feel about cross-promotion or link exchange, and if there are any tools you might recommend to the audience for bringing that closer to zero.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, this is a great point. Cross-promotion is one of the most important tools you have, particularly if you have one game that's successful and you're building a second game. The best thing to do is take the users from that existing game and send them off to the second game, right? Because those are free users. So, you know, services like Flurry, Chartboost, Tapjoy, everybody has some sort of cross-promotion tool, right? It's a pretty basic thing. So a lot of people just kind of throw it in there as an add-in because it's really not that complicated. Link exchange is also really powerful. It's a really cost-effective way to say, I want to acquire new users from another developer. However, you have to be very careful there because direct deal platforms or link exchanges, they favor the sophisticated and the shady over the unsophisticated, because what will happen is the sophisticated guy will say, I'm going to send you all my users in China who don't monetize. The unsophisticated developer will just blindly send users over, right? So it can be very fraught with a lot of peril. And there have been a lot of cases of people faking clicks or faking impressions during the exchange. So it's just something that if you get in that world, it is a great way to acquire traffic, but you have to be smart about it, right? So you have to look at the revenue of those users coming in and taking a look at the users that are leaving and seeing if they match up or not, right? So just something to be mindful of as you exchange traffic. And the other thing too is a lot of companies don't have the capacity to just keep going out there and talking to the next developer to try to find a good partner for exchanging traffic. So it can also be operationally intense. Yeah.
To jump on the last question about cross-promotion, have you seen any sort of creative approaches by some companies that did something within their own portfolio? Like, for example, Zynga, you know, they have like Zynga Bucks that sort of encourages players to spend that within all of their games. So some examples of those type of companies.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one important step is not to just blindly cross-promote users. So that's the first step. So if your users are in, say, an FPS style game, you might not want to send them to a Hello Kitty game as a cross-promotion, right? So that's really important. But the second is if there is a high overlap affinity between two games, absolutely, giving them, saying, download this other game now and get a discount on currency or free currency, you know, that dramatically improves conversion, right? It's a really big step up. And the other thing that's been interesting that we found is if you cross-promote, so if you show somebody a relevant ad that they download and it's another game that they play, so oftentimes it can actually boost the retention of the original game as well, right? So we see this largely with casino games, which is really interesting because we have a lot of casino game publishers and advertisers, is that a lot of users will download 5 different slots games or 10 different slots games and play them all. You know, they're probably going through and just, you know, once they run out of some free currency, move on to the next one, move on to the next one. So it's counterintuitive, but generally with all the data that we've seen, if there's high overlap and high affinity, you're not losing that player, right? They're also coming back. But going back to your question more directly, yes, any sort of promotions you can give them, right? That's really like the key way to get them over the hump. And unfortunately, you know, there's not a lot of cross-game currency platforms out there. iOS specifically doesn't even allow it. But that could eventually become an extremely powerful way to just, you know, you're building a currency within, say, all your Android apps, right? And you can offer them discounts to go one game or another, or just free currency to just keep playing and build loyalty. But yeah, generally, see, as long as you promote it the right way and you give them something for free, it works out very well. Okay, thank you.